Emily, and today I'm here to bring you one of my favorite videos of the year, and that is my Nonfiction November TBR. Nonfiction November is a month-long reading initiative hosted by Olive from A Book Olive, and this year she's got several other co-hosts, and I'll link Olive's announcement video down there. And every year they do 4 prompts, and they encourage you to pick a nonfiction book for each prompt and read those. But really, the goal is just to get people reading more nonfiction, and even if you just read one nonfiction book, you're considered a participant in Nonfiction November. So this year, I'm reading a book for each of the 4 prompts, and then I have one extra book that I'm throwing in there, along with 2 other fiction books that I'm planning to read for 7 books for this month. So let's just get into it. I'm very, very excited to show all the nonfiction books I'm going to be reading. The first prompt this year is time, and for that I'm going to be reading Furious Hours, Murder, Fraud, and the Last Trial of Harper Lee by Casey Sepp. This is about a case in Alabama in the 1970s where a reverend named Willie Maxwell murdered 5 different members of his family for insurance fraud, and he was actually prosecuted, but then he was he got off. And so then at the funeral of his last victim, another person killed Willie Maxwell, and Harper Lee became interested in the case, and she came down to Alabama for that trial for the murder of Willie Maxwell. And it's about how she wanted to write a book about Willie Maxwell and his murder that was sort of going to compete with In Cold Blood by Truman Capote, and it's just about her attempts to write this book, the trial, Willie Maxwell's wife, the race relations of the South at this time, and just all kinds of interesting stuff. I'm really looking forward to this. This came out last year, and it was pretty popular on BookTube when it came out. And of course, this fits the time prompt because it's got the word hours in the title, which of course is a unit of time. The next prompt is movement, and for this one I'm going to be reading Mrs. Adams in Winter by Michael O'Brien. This is about Louisa Adams, who was the wife of the 6th president, John Quincy Adams, and she and John Quincy lived in Russia, in St. Petersburg, Russia, where he was the ambassador. And then he had to go to Paris I believe he was doing a treaty, and he left Louisa there with her child in Russia. And this is about their journey to get to Paris. And they traveled through Russia, they traveled through Germany, which I believe was going through a war right at that time, and then they eventually end up in Paris. But of course, at this period of time, Napoleon had just come back from Elba, and so there was a lot of political unrest. And so it's about their journey, the politics of the time, the history of the time, and then the global, the interplay of European politics. And I actually got this book at McKay's when I lived in Nashville, and I moved home from Nashville 3 years ago. So it's about time I got this read. I'm reading this for the movement prompt because, of course, the book is taken up by Louisa Adams' journey, and they're moving from place to place, and I figured that's the movement prompt. The next prompt this year is Buzz, and for that one I'm reading Becoming by Michelle Obama, and I'm reading this because when this book came out, there was a ton of buzz about it, and of course this November, President Obama's book, A Promised Land, is coming out, so I'm sure there's going to be renewed buzz about this book, and of course buzz about Obama's book. So this is just Michelle Obama's autobiography. It talks about her life in Chicago, and then it talks about her time at Princeton. It talks about how she met Barack and their marriage, and then of course Barack's political career and their time in the White House. And I'm really, really looking forward to this book. My intention is to listen to it on audio, and I've heard rave reviews about both the book and the audiobook, so I'm really, really looking forward to this, and this is definitely a buzzy book. If you've been watching my channel for any length of time, it's about par for the course for me to read a book about 2 years after the buzz 2 years after a book has come out and all the buzz has finally died off. So yeah, I'm really, really looking forward to checking this one out. The last nonfiction November prompt this year is discovery. And for that prompt, I'll be reading The Lady in the Black Lagoon, Hollywood Monsters and the Lost Legacy of Milicent Patrick by Mallory O'Mara. This is partially a biography of Milicent Patrick, and who was the first female animator for Disney. She worked for Disney, I believe, in like the late 1940s, early 1950s, and then she also was the artist that created the creature of the Black Lagoon for the eponymous movie of 1954. She basically designed and created the costume for the creature, and it was considered very high-tech special effects for that era. So it's about her life and the impact she had on sort of the special effects industry, but then it's also about Mallory O'Mara's journey to discover more about her life, because she sort of fell into obscurity and nobody really knew what happened to her, and they didn't even know if she had ever died or not, or if she was still living. And Mallory O'Mara went on sort of like a quest to figure out if she was still living, and if not, what happened to her. And it's just sort of a, looking. And then I think this is one of those stories where like the author also talks about the person's influence on their own life as well, and brings in elements of their own life. So I'm really looking forward to this. I picked it for the discovery prompt because it's talked about in the blurb that Mallory O'Mara found like new documentation that hadn't been seen in a long time, or if ever, and so she used that as a part of the foundation for her book. And of course that's a big discovery for the history of the special effects industry. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to this. I think it's going to be very fascinating, and I just really love this cover as well. I think it's very beautiful. In addition to the books that I'm going to be reading for the prompts, I have 4 other books that I'm hoping to get to in November, like to finish in November. The first one of those is my collection of letters by C.S. Lewis. I'm working on that. I'm reading 10 pages a day, and I think I might get done by the very end of the month of November, but if not, it'll just get moved into December. I'm not going to show it because I've already shown it before on my channel, and yeah, it's just a big chunky book full of C.S. Lewis's letters. I'm also planning to read, if I have time, House of Dreams, The Life of Ella in Montgomery by Liz Rosenberg. This is a juvenile biography of the life of Ellen Montgomery, who is the author of Anne of Green Gables, among other things. When I put this on my TBR, I was under the impression that it was a graphic novel, but it's not. It's a juvenile biography. There are pictures in it, but it's not a graphic novel. So I'm going to put this on like my low end of the list. This is going to be something I read if I get everything else done, but I assume it's just a standard biography of Ella Montgomery, who I know from past reading had like a sad life. She grew up with her grandparents, and she also suffered from depression, but I'm sure this is being a juvenile biography. This won't go into like much detail about the sadder things, but I think it'll still be a good starting place to learning more about her life. I'm also planning to read 2 fiction books this year in November. The first one is my book club book. We haven't had book club yet at the time of filming this. It's actually tomorrow, and I assume it's going to be a fiction book because we've only ever read one nonfiction book, and that was Born a Crime by Trevor, which is a great book, and I definitely recommend it for Nonfiction November if you haven't read it, by the way. But mostly we've been doing fiction books for book club. The final fiction book that I want to read in November is Finding Noof by Zoe Ferraris. This is actually for my work book club. We are doing books set in a foreign country for November, and so this is set in Saudi Arabia. It's a murder mystery. Noof is a 16-year-old girl who goes missing, and her family hires Nayir, who is a desert guide, to discover where she went, and he is trying to find her when her body is discovered out in the desert, but it's determined that she died of drowning. And so Nayir is forced to join forces with a woman that works in the coroner's office, Katya, and Katya's a more modern woman, and Nayir is more, traditional, but it's about how they sort of come to an understanding, and they work together to solve the mystery of what happened to Noof. This has actually been on my TBR for a long time. I saw it on Kate from the Novel Nomads channel, but she actually had the UK edition, and I didn't know that this and that were the same book. The UK edition is called The Night of the Mirage, and so I was really, really excited when I found out that this was the same book and that my library had it, and I can read it for my book club next month. So that's all I'm planning to read in November. I'm super excited about Nonfiction November and seeing everybody else's TBR and hearing about everybody else's Nonfiction November over the course of the month of November. I hope everybody else is reading some great books right now. You're keeping safe and healthy, and I'll talk to you again soon. Bye from me and Milo.